with a high level of deprivation is essential. Among the better performing states, Manipur had low per capita GSDP and MPCE. While the success stories of Kerala and Tamil Nadu are well known, the success story of Himachal Pradesh, Manipur and Sikkim are less known. We always talk about Gujarat, but now my results show that Kerala and Tamil Nadu do better. Himachal Pradesh, Kerala, Tamil Nadu do better than Gujarat in terms of overall well-being, even if you include give weight to the income growth. Let me make some concluding observations. India experienced higher growth in the post-reform period, notwithstanding the slowdown in the economy since 2008-9. Given a high level of investment, financed mainly by domestic saving, higher growth can be sustained. If India succeeds in eliminating long-term constraints in quality of education, health, nutrition, well-being. The present pattern of growth had aggravated interstate inequality, worsened rural-urban disparity, and intra-rural and urban inequality. Undoubtedly, the growth in the post-reform period was not inclusive. Among the developing countries, India fared badly compared to Indonesia, Malaysia, China, and Bangladesh. On happiness and social progress, Bangladesh, with half of the per capita GDP of India, had better ranking than India. India can improve its ranking on happiness and social progress if basic human needs improve rapidly along with high growth. The recent concern of slowing economic growth should not obliterate our concern for reversing the growing inequality. Higher growth and macroeconomic stability are preconditions for reducing poverty, but not sufficient. For rapid poverty reduction and sustainable growth, it is equally important to address worsening inequality, eliminating worst forms of deprivation in education, health, and malnutrition, poor performance of agriculture. So, thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Radhakrishnan, for delivering the lecture. I take pleasure in inviting Professor S.R. Hashim, who is Chairman of Indian Association of Social Science Institution, Chairman of Institute for Human Development, and President of Forum for Global Knowledge Sharing. Professor Hashim, during his long professional career spanning over nearly 50 years, has held high positions in academics as well as in government planning, economic administration, and diplomacy. I now request him to deliver the presidential remarks.
Professor Radhakrishna, Professor Mishra, Professor Kundu, Professor Atal, and all my friends, eminent participants. It is indeed a pleasure to visit this campus, a beautiful campus, serene atmosphere, particularly since we come from Delhi with a very polluted environment. It was such a relief to breathe fresh air in this beautiful campus. I am grateful to Professor Mishra for shouldering the responsibility, and Professor Jayashree Ravindran, his colleague, for shouldering the responsibility of hosting this conference this year in Hyderabad, in this particular campus. They have done it very well. The organization, the planning, in fact, it is an excellent model to be followed in future also. I'm really thankful to Professor Mishra. This year's theme was on urbanization. The theme paper has been circulated. And I'm happy that we could persuade Professor Kundu to lead the discussion in this conference and also give the keynote on the outlines of the various sub-themes of the piece. He has really presented that outline in a very linked manner in all the sub-themes, which will be an excellent guide to further discussion for these 2 days in this conference. Professor Kundu brought to us the important features of urbanization. He has maintained throughout that the urbanization has been slow and perhaps is likely to be slow, irrespective of what international organizations and some of the organizations and people, perhaps including me, believe. We have had many provocative discussions with Professor Kundu, but in spite of that, I do recognize that he is the grand guru of urban studies in this country, and we have a lot to learn from him, and I am happy that he will be here. The Lok Singh Memorial Lecture has been one of the very special features of our conferences. In fact, for last few years, we have been making the Lok Singh Memorial Lecture itself as the main inaugural lecture of the conference. We have had eminent people so far to deliver. This is the 10th lecture, 9 already. 6 of them were published, first 6 of them published in the form of a book, and we hope that in future we will also bring out a book. This year, again, I am very happy that we were able to persuade Professor Radhakrishna, one of the most eminent scholars of economics in this country today, to deliver this lecture, and we really thank him that he accepted, in spite of his many other commitments which keep him busy. Professor Radhakrishna has had, in fact, the introduction has already been given. He has been an old friend. We were contemporaries in Gokhale Institute. In fact, Kundu also was there for some time, though a little junior to us. But Professor Radhakrishna has had a profound background in econometrics and statistics, very strong background. But instead of building up esoteric models based on that background, he has devoted himself to studying the down-to-earth problems, using his econometric studies, of course, very well, but the problems he has handled throughout his research career are related to poverty, living conditions, well-being, nutrition, malnutrition, agriculture. In fact, at present he is heading the commission, Andhra Pradesh Commission on Agriculture, with which I also have been associated at his request. With all this background, now he has brought to us an idea which is at the frontier of thinking in economic science, in economics or welfare thinking, welfare studies. The idea of a well-being index, or as some like to call it, happiness index. This is an idea which is still in evolution, and it will take quite some time to have a consensus as to ultimately what are the indicators we should go into it, what are the ways it should be measured. But he had brought this idea in a wholesome way to us, and I must say that personally I have learnt a lot, and I might be speaking for many of my colleagues here as well. He has also presented to us many associated indices and a combination of them for ranking Indian states. It is really the table 1 particularly, and then the other tables. Table 1 particularly came as a surprise that in South Asia, we thought ourselves to be doing very well in comparison with our neighbors. But in the ranking of well-being or happiness or what we would call it, India is not so well, and in fact it ranks behind the states, behind the countries which have much lower GDP per capita or many other indicators. It is also behind China. Of course, welfare indices, while they have taken many dimensions into account, I don't know how much democracy plays a role. Living in a democratic environment, feeling a bit more of individual freedom, if that is incorporated into indices, how then we fare or compare with China, I don't know. There may be a difference, and there could be perhaps a way of incorporating those indices also. But as I said, this is an idea which is still a work in progress, or an idea which is still evolving. The other point which sometimes strikes us is that, of course, many have preferred to call it well-being index, but some also have called happiness index. And as Professor Radhakrishnan has pointed out, Bhutan was in the lead in giving this name, and many other countries, particularly countries like UK, have picked it up and have done considerable work in that direction. But there are two ways of looking at happiness. One is purely subjective way of looking at happiness. And it, as he pointed out, in that subjective way of looking at happiness is, I am very rich, but if my neighbor is richer, I feel unhappy. And there could be many other reasons for such unhappiness. And it becomes very difficult to measure this type of subjective unhappiness. And therefore, most of the studies have fallen on objective indicators of well-being. And objective indicators, for example, poverty is an objective indicator. We don't know how a poor person feels, whether he really feels that he is poor, or he thinks he is all right, he really feels he is happy or unhappy, but we call him poor if he doesn't have a certain level of expenditure per capita, he doesn't have a certain type of a house and certain level of living. So it is an objective indicator that we are imposing on the poor also. GDP, in fact, to start with, was the most objective, but also missing many dimensions. The Human Development Index went further by including health and education along with income into the indices, and happiness or well-being index has gone further. But by and large, still, the indices which are included are objective. That is a collective idea of happiness rather than individual happiness. But since it is an idea which is evolving, which is expanding, I think in future we may have many more dimensions of this idea and be able to incorporate in that. I'm really grateful to Professor Radhakrishnan for delivering such a profound address. I really learnt a lot from this personally, and I'm very happy to hear that address, and thank you very much for participating in the conference, to all of you. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I now request Professor Hashim to present a memento to Professor Radhakrishnan. And now I request Professor Mishra to present a shawl to Professor Radhakrishnan. Thank you, sir. I now request conference convener Dr. Jayashree Ravindran to give vote of thanks.
Thank you, Anupama. Respected Professor Radhakrishna, Professor Hashim, Professor Amitabh Kundu, distinguished guests here, ladies and gentlemen, I deem it my privilege to be proposing the word of thanks for this wonderful event. But the fact remains that we can't thank you enough. Thanks for the time that you've given us this day and for making this event possible indeed. Our heartfelt thanks to Professor Radhakrishna for delivering the 10th Tarlok Singh Memorial Lecture, and no wonder this was a masterly presentation giving insights into various indicators of happiness and well-being, which perhaps is the sum and substance of Homo sapiens in this planet, and for very neatly dissecting the states of well-beings amongst nations, amongst states in India, and many, many thanks to you, for Professor Radhakrishna, for delivering this lecture. Thank you, Professor Hashim, for the presidential address, and mainly also for choosing to work with IPE. It was such an enriching experience to collaborate with the Indian Association of Social Science Institutions, and also to Professor Gupta for working hand in hand on this event. Special thanks to Professor Amitabh Kundu, not only for his time here today and his address, but for being with us